Welcome. You can rest your thoughts now. Tonight's story is soft and slow, like mist curling through quiet trees. It's about a girl named Sarah who dreams of places no one else seems to remember. Towns without names, roads that shift in the dark, and windows that only appear when the world is quiet enough to listen. She doesn't chase these places, she simply remembers them a little more each night. So settle in, let your breath slow. There's nothing you need to do, just listen and follow the path only dreams know how to draw. You're safe here. There are places, you've seen them only once, maybe perched at the edge of a sidewalk you've never stepped on, a hallway that shouldn't have been in your school, a row of houses glimpsed from a moving train that no one else seems to notice. You forget them. You're supposed to, but sometimes, in the hour between sleep and not quite sleep, they come back, and they feel closer than they should. Not dangerous, just aware. Sarah dreams of these places every few nights, not always the same ones, but always in the same way. She wakes up just before something important happens. A tower leans, a window opens, a voice says her name, and then nothing, just her ceiling, a bit of sweat, a lingering map she can nearly draw, like a dream trying to become a memory. Most people stop dreaming like that, or grow out of it, or choose not to say it aloud ever again. But she doesn't stop, and it doesn't stop calling her. This is a story about Sarah and the places that started following her back, and the choice she will have to make between remembering the places no one should know, or staying in the safety of the ones everyone pretends are real. It begins in a town where a single corner has disappeared, but no one seems to remember there was ever anything there at all. Sarah lived in a small town, the kind of town that didn't require a map. People knew the names of side streets. Mailboxes never wandered too far from the houses they belonged to, and the sidewalks were lined with those comforting cracks, the kind you'd memorized riding your bike as a kid, trying not to let the tires hit them. Everything here felt fixed, like chapters in a well-behaved book. But lately something had changed, something so small that no one else seemed to notice it at all. It was a corner, that's what Sarah called it, though it was more than that. An edge of the street that had gone strange. Last week it had been there, a bakery on the right, a florist wrapped in ivy on the other side of the alley, a perfect quiet corner where she'd once sat to sketch leaves and thunderclouds, and now gone, not replaced, not demolished, just absent. Where the road should have bent, it simply didn't. Instead of an intersection, there was now smooth pavement, no seam, no scar in the sidewalk, just street where something else should have existed. Sarah had asked her neighbor about it, Mrs. Tiller, who'd lived on Crescent Street for 18 years. "You must be thinking of the bakery downtown," she had said too quickly, "or maybe something you dreamed." She kept hearing that word, but Sarah knew the kind of knowing that lives in your fingertips. She visited the corner again that evening. The sun was slipping into the lake, all copper and blur. She stood at the place where the street should curve, and when she closed her eyes, she didn't just remember the missing corner. She saw inside it. There was a door, not fancy, but green, frosted window, a brass handle that was dull from opening hundreds of quiet times, and a feeling of being noticed. She opened her eyes. Gone, smooth concrete, perfect street, a hollow place in the world, pretending it had always been that way. That night she dreamed. It started the same way most of her dreams did lately, in a town she half recognized. Palm-sized houses, lampposts dripping gold like honey, the sound of a bell that hadn't been used in years. She walked down a street she didn't know, but her feet did, and there, at the edge of it, a signpost, blank until she got close. Words faded into it like stars behind fog. This place was never meant to be remembered. And then a voice, low, patient, not unkind. Then, why did you keep coming back? Sarah turned but saw no one. The air trembled with the weight of something big and close by. She whispered, I didn't mean to. I just remembered the corner. The dream answered, same voice, now softer. You're not supposed to, but now that you have. The ground shifted just a little. She felt herself falling, not fast, but inward, back toward her bed, back toward the waking. But just before it all slipped away, something scrawled itself along the air mid-dream, a phrase that burned behind her eyes as she woke up in the dark. Some places remain quiet because remembering them finishes the story too soon. She sat up slowly. The room was silent. The hour blinked 3:11 a.m. and at the edge of her bed, something scratchy and folded waited. She reached for it with slow fingers. An old postcard, blank except for one detail. The postmark was smudged, but beneath it a name written in her own handwriting. Sarah, return to where you were never meant to go. Her breath caught in her throat slowly, not from fear, but something else. Recognition, like a place inside her had just remembered itself. Morning came, but it didn't feel like it belonged to morning anymore. The room was the same, the desk, the crooked blinds, the blinking light on her charging cable. But the air had thinned, like someone had taken a sentence she hadn't finished writing and folded it into the shadows behind her bookshelf. Sarah sat up slowly, the postcard from the dream gone. She checked the blankets, the floor, even beneath her pillow. Nothing, but she remembered it, down to the smudge of ink beneath that one word, return. A dream, maybe, but not like the other ones. This one had left something behind. She stood, shivering, crossed to her mirror, half expected to see word fragments lurking in the glass, but there were none. Just the look of someone who'd felt watched by their own memory. Downstairs, everything was normal. The kettle hummed. Birds insisted it was still spring, but when she spilled a bit of milk onto the counter and wiped it away, she saw something beneath it, etched faintly into the counter's varnish. She leaned close. A tiny pattern, 3 dots, a curve, then 2 more. She knew that shape. She'd drawn it before, in the margin of a notebook last month, and in the corner of her pillowcase with her finger just before sleep. The shape had no name, but in her dreams it always followed the door, the green one with the brass handle. She turned it into her palm with a pencil, then grabbed her old sketchpad, flipped to the back, began drawing. Each time she let the pencil move, something inside her tingled, not like memory, more like repetition. She'd made this before. In 10 minutes she had drawn a crooked telephone pole that didn't ring, a hotel sign that flickered one letter off the green door, a narrow alley that hummed, and a river made of whispering shapes that spoke her name once, 10 dreams ago. When she looked at it all together, it formed something close, not exact, but very nearly a map. of somewhere that shouldn't exist, somewhere she'd visited and maybe was being invited back to. The phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. It's not safe to find the place, but it's worse to ignore it. No name, no thread, just those words. She stared long and hard, and then whispered, "You saw the dream too, didn't you?" The phone screen dimmed, as if answering yes or staying quiet where silence said more. Later that day, while walking past her school's back fence, she saw it again, the shape, scrawled into the brick just above the garbage bins. 3 dots, a curve, 2 more, not etched by her, not plain marker or chalk. It glowed faintly, only for a second, then faded. She stared at it a long time, long enough that the geometry teacher passing nearby said, "Looking for something, Sarah?" She almost answered, "Just trying to remember something I shouldn't know," but she didn't. Instead, she touched the bricks once and kept walking back home. That night, she reopened the sketchbook. The drawing she made hours ago had changed somehow. A line had extended on the alley edge, leading to a door that wasn't there when she drew it, and next to the door, a number, 74. Her house number was 72. She lived in a duplex. There was no 74 on her street, at least not yesterday. Still, she opened her front door, slipped on her coat, and waited for midnight, the sketchbook tucked under one arm. She stepped outside when the moon was climbing, walked past 72, past the mailbox light that always flickered, and there, between her neighbor's driveway and the side fence filled with unused flower pots, a new door, dark green, brass handle, peeling paint that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her breath. No hinges, just the number 74 painted where no house had ever been. She reached forward, not to open it, but to touch the wood. Her mind spun with 100 questions, and in the pause where she almost pulled her hand back, a voice whispered from inside the sketchbook, folded between the pages, unmistakably hers. "You already started the story. The rest is just remembering." It was colder past midnight. The air wasn't icy, but sharp, like fabric that had just been ironed, a kind of crispness that made Sarah feel the shape of her coat too clearly on her shoulders. She stood in front of door 74. There was no light above it, no frame around it, not even a wall really, just a door, resting where a fence shouldn't have had space. It didn't belong to a building, it belonged to a possibility, and it was waiting. The number flickered faintly, like it had been borrowed from a different door long ago. Sarah's hand hovered near the brass handle. It was warmer now against the chill, almost pulsing, like something beneath it had started listening, not in a threatening way, just expectant. She took a breath, not a deep one, just enough to remind her she was here, not there, not in the dream, except, what if she wasn't awake? What if this was still the dream? Another sitting on a swing that didn't belong to her school's playground. Another running barefoot past a red sign she didn't understand. And in every piece, she was carrying the same notebook she had now. The reflections began, singing only 2 notes, but layered like echoes from a hallway she hadn't walked in yet. She looked down. Her hands were still her hands, but when she looked up again, a woman stood at the far end of the room, not close, not walking toward her, just standing, head tilted, hair long, straight, catching no light at all. Her dress looked stitched from robe and wind, paper thin, library colored. Her hands were empty, except they weren't. Sarah felt the weight of them even from here. Then the woman spoke. Her voice was too quiet to hear, but Sarah's thoughts translated it anyway. You left before we could show you, but you remembered enough. Sarah stepped forward. The room didn't change, but she felt herself move differently, like her memory started walking with her, not behind, not ahead, beside. The woman gestured to the notebook. Sarah opened it. The page that had been blank now held a sketch, a building on its side, a tower, twisted windows, numbers written backward. She hadn't drawn this, but the signature at the bottom was hers, written backwards. Above the image, one word appeared, drawn slowly with ink that shimmered only when she blinked. Return. The woman pointed at Sarah, at the sketch, then behind her, to the door, still open, still waiting. Sarah looked back once more at the fractured mirror, at the scenes that did not feel like could have been, but already was. Something surged in her chest, a feeling of being remembered in more than one direction. And as the scene faded, one final whisper followed her, this time from the doorframe itself, the brass speaking like a tuned string in her ear. This is not the first time you've gone missing. She turned, left the room, and stepped back into the street, shaking slightly, but not from fear, from recognition. The map in her sketchbook had another mark now, drawn by her own hand while she wasn't looking. Another place remembered her back. It appeared while she was sketching. She hadn't meant to draw it. The pencil moved on its own, but not wildly, not in some other worldly trance, just with quiet conviction. And when she stepped back to examine the page, there it was, tall, crooked, framed by clouds, a tower, no windows, no doors, no stairs, no entrance, just stone, dark, weather-worn, spiraling up into a sky she didn't recognize, and at the very top, a circle of light hovering like the echo of something that had once wanted to be a lantern. Sarah blinked. The tower shimmered slightly. Her fingers moved again, tapping into a line across the base. Her pencil once more drew what she hadn't consciously seen, a figure small at the top, back turned, gazing into the distance. Was it her? She wasn't sure, but her chest said yes. That night she dreamed of fog and wind. The sky sat too close to the trees. Street signs hummed when she looked away. In the distance, the tower stood, impossibly tall, unbound by scale. A single bell rang from the top, one tone, clear but muted, like it came through water and memory at the same time. She tried to run to it, but her feet didn't move. The path unfolded, yet she stayed in place. Every part of her wanted to reach it, but whatever lived up there, maybe she already had reached it and forgotten how to come back down. Sarah woke with a start. Her fingers tingled. The sketchbook buzzed beneath her fingertips like a heartbeat trying to line up with hers. She sat upright and turned the page back. The tower looked different now. A crack had appeared in the middle, not breaking, but opening, and inside it, more stairs than could ever fit inside that shape. They twisted softly, drawn in smudged shadows, rising. "It's waiting," she whispered. But for what? In the days that followed, strange things began to return. Her alarm clock blinked 3:33 once, then reset to 12 o'clock. A stranger at the market glanced at her and said, "You've stood high places before." And the ivy behind her house began curling in a spiral she'd drawn in a dream months ago. Every time she saw the tower in her sketchbook, something pulled. Each detail she added over time came back different. She would draw a cloud, and hours later it would look like someone had folded a face into it. She'd shade in a shadow, only to find a doorway gently suggested inside it. One afternoon, she wrote beneath the tower, "Why can't I reach you?" The words sat still until she turned the page and found, scrawled in the corner in her own handwriting, "Because you haven't remembered how you got up there last time." She gasped, not from fear, but from that cold silk feeling dreams sometimes leave behind when your body feels certain but your mind hasn't caught up yet. The next dream came without sound, only wind, wolves howling far away, not frightening, not close, just reminders that not all wildness chases you. She stood at the base of the tower again, except this time she was barefoot, holding no sketch pad, but something was tucked into the satin ribbon of her dress. A key, not metal, glass, misted, unclear, but hers. She knew its shape, somewhere behind her ribs. She turned, expecting to face stairs, but there still were none. Instead, the tower breathed once, a long inhale, and she was inside. No movement, but the walls now surrounded her. Smoky light curled upward through the space where stairs should have been, and a bell pulsed again from the very top. 3 soft notes, one for the dream, one for the memory, one for the place that would come next. She put her hand to the wall, found steps folded into the stone, not for walking, for remembering. When she woke the next morning, there was dirt under her fingernails and a feather in the center of her sketchbook, small, black, curved like a question mark, and beneath it a note not written by her, greater than, "You've been higher than this before. You just forgot how quiet it feels the moment before the story turns." The town had a market, small, wobbling carts full of local jam, a narrow alley that always smelled of sun-dried vegetables and citrus rind, vendors with names everyone knew, even if they didn't speak often. Sarah had walked it 100 times, but today there was an aisle she didn't remember, a split between 2 stalls that hadn't been there yesterday. On her left, a spice vendor who sold cinnamon bark wrapped in twine. On her right, an older woman with enamel pins that changed color in the light. And between them, a shop front, narrow, brick the color of moss, windows so fogged they showed only glints of what was inside. At the top, a hanging wooden sign, greater than "Found Objects and Nearly Lost Things." Below it, a sign written in chalk, faint, fading, greater than "If you walk in, expect to feel something you can't name." Sarah stood still. People passed by on either side. No one looked, no one paused, as if the store wasn't there for anyone else today, just her. She stepped inside. A chime tinkled above the door, not sharp, more like the sound of a spoon placed gently in a ceramic sink. The space was deep, much deeper than the narrow exterior allowed. Shelves climbed upward in uneven rows, stacks of shadowed boxes, crates filled with old ribbons, drawers half opened with yellowed paper curling out like sleeping tongues. No one stood behind the counter, and there was no cash register, just objects and meanings. The room smelled like cedar, old glue, and unsent letters. Each shelf was labeled loosely in chalk, tiny things that hurt once, belongings left behind in friendships, remembered by scent, not by sound, promised tomorrows that became yesterday. She walked gently, parted a string of dried rose garland, and turned a corner into the dimmer part of the shop, where the light curved sideways through warped window glass. What caught her eye was a silver thread, not hanging but floating, tied to nothing, its end draped over the edge of a small wooden box. She lifted the lid. Inside, a tiny scarf, faded pink, rip in the middle, worn at the edge like someone worried it between their fingers. She knew that fabric, not in words, but in pulse. She reached for it, and all at once a memory returned. A younger version of her, age 6, standing in her cousin's old playroom, holding that scarf. It had belonged to a doll she called Nighty. The name made no sense even then. But she'd once whispered a secret into the scarf, wrapped it around the doll's neck, then left it in a box during a move. She had forgotten all of it until now, and the secret she whispered, she couldn't remember the words, but her heart recognized why she'd whispered it. She had felt unseen, just like now, and this scarf had remembered for her. She folded it carefully, left it in the box. Nothing in her wanted to take it. It belonged here, but before she stepped away, a note appeared on a slip of parchment just beneath the scarf, a message written in her childhood handwriting. It mattered, even if no one said so. She blinked back tears, not painful ones, just soft, inevitable salt that old feelings used to walk back through the door. She moved to the next shelf, found a button with no matching shirt, a card that had never been mailed, a paper crane with a name she didn't know written inside its wing. Every object remembered something, just enough for her to feel like she'd never truly lost anything. The place held it all, not to give back, but to give grace. Before she left, something tapped her shoulder. No one there, just a mirror beside the counter, etched into the frame. Don't worry if you forget again. Some shops exist just to keep the weight off your hands. Sarah stepped back onto the street, the shop behind her, gone, back to wall and sky. But when she reached inside her pocket hours later, she found something she hadn't placed there, a stitch of faded pink thread. And in her journal that night, without even choosing the words first, she wrote, "It mattered, even if no one said so." The dream began in fog. Sarah stood at a curve in the road she'd never seen before, but that felt strangely worn. curved, it actually bent as she approached, a brick or two tapering sideways as if rearranging in real time to lead her somewhere else. A voice entered her head, not sound, not thought, but instruction. You're only allowed to follow this far because you once forgot how to forget. She nodded like this made sense, because it did, somehow. Up ahead, yellow tape, but blank. No warning, no label, just floating strips, waist high, fluttering against nothing. Beyond them, a space missing, not just a gap in the trees, but an active lack. No noise, no color, no sense of depth. The road ended, or had been ended for her, this far and no further for now. As she reached for her phone to snap a photo, the screen glitched, flickered. A message appeared in her notes app, time-stamped tomorrow. Just one sentence, greater than "Don't step forward yet, you're not alone anymore." She looked back at the road behind her and saw someone, not approaching, not chasing, but waiting. Their figure was unclear, standing beside the smallest lamppost, which hadn't been there a moment ago. They waved once, palm open, then faded into the roadside shadow like they were part of the dusk. Sarah ran her fingertip along her sketchbook cover. Later that night, she didn't draw the figure, but she added the road, nearly the full thing. A dotted line appeared at the end without her sketching it, as if the paper was saving space for something still coming, and below it, in her handwriting, words she didn't remember writing. This place doesn't forget the ones who once saw too far. She closed the book and finally said aloud, "Okay, I'll wait to remember a bit more," then slept, and the flat of her foot pulsed once, warm, like the road had just forgiven her for arriving too soon. Sarah hadn't planned to go to the lake. She only meant to walk, clear her head, but her sketchbook tugged at her fingers, and the breeze nudged her steps sideways until the trees opened into soft, still water. Lake Una, a place the town barely talked about anymore, not because it was haunted, but because it felt like something that didn't want explanation. You came here if you were feeling too much of something, or nothing at all. She sat on the wooden bench, knees up, sketchbook laid open across her lap. The pencil moved before her thoughts did. Lines, curves, a tower where none existed, a shoreline that didn't match this place, a silhouette maybe, most knee, right before the door in the water opens. She opened her mouth, closed it. There were no doors in the water, not really, only her hand pressed firmly unfamiliar, and now it had shape. You're, he nodded. I don't stay long. The waking doesn't hold me well. Are you like me? He didn't answer directly. He looked to the lake. The water shifted. A ripple formed. No boat, no wind, but down in the movement, she saw it. A door, half submerged, a green circle painted at the center. Her fingertips began to tingle. He stood, said only one more thing. You can't open it until you ask why it's closed. He looked at her sketchbook one last time, added gently, and bring the page you ripped out. It's the one that lets it open or keeps it shut. Sarah blinked, and he was gone. No footsteps, no shape in the grass, only silence, and her breath suddenly shallow, like she'd been holding the world too tightly in her ribs. She turned to the back of her sketchbook, an empty tear where a page had once been. She hadn't even remembered removing it, but she knew exactly where it was now, folded, tucked beneath her bed, crumpled on one side. And in the dream that night, a bell rang 3 times, then a splash, and the door beneath the lake opened half an inch. The page wasn't where she thought it was. Sarah had been sure beneath the bed, under the poetry book she'd hidden from herself months ago. But no, not there. She rifled through drawers, slipped her hand under floorboards just loose enough to groan. She even checked her coat pocket twice, still warm from the dream, but not folded and not there. She sat on the floor in the early morning dark, sketchbook light on her lap, chills on her arms that hadn't left since the dream. That door, half submerged, calling, just a little open, enough to see through, not enough to enter. Bring the page you ripped out, he'd said. It's the one that lets it open or keeps it shut. Her voice had cracked when she echoed it aloud. She tugged an old fabric box from the back of her closet. Inside, stickers faded by time, dried up pens in colors dreams once wore, a cloud-shaped pendant she'd never worn, too precious for some reason she couldn't name. And then a page, crumpled, soft, lined with sketchwork in graphite and green. She knew it before unfolding it fully. This was the page, the one she wasn't supposed to keep. She pulled it into the light. It shifted, literally, edges curling inwards like a shy creature, the sketch shimmering ever so slightly, like it was drawn with memory, not ink. And though it was hers, there were sections she couldn't have drawn. She wouldn't have a spiral staircase descending deep beneath water, a pair of eyes pressed behind frosted glass, the word before written upside down along a shoreline. What did I know back then? She whispered. She touched the center of the page, near the door, and it tensed, not wildly, but like something curled away from contact. The drawing responded by releasing a sound she didn't hear, not with her ears, but with her ribs, a note of discomfort, long echoed. A page pushed too far. She almost put it away, but the edges unfolded again, slowly now, a bit braver. Then she saw the bottom corner, a shape drawn half in pencil, half in something else. It didn't rub off when she tried. Not graphite, not charcoal, just absence filled. A figure, featureless, standing beneath the drawn lake, arms at its sides, waiting, watching the drawn door from beneath the waterline. It hadn't been there last time. She hadn't drawn it, and yet she remembered it, not from this sketch, but from a dream when she was 7, when she woke gasping for air and couldn't sleep, facing the mirror for 2 days. Sarah turned the drawing over, no writing, just a tiny smudge, green-grey and shifting like it might be blinking. She folded the page quickly, not in fear, in respect, and went to her bag. Outside the wind had changed. The birds didn't start yet, but the sky had opened just a bit too much for this hour. Dawn hadn't come and wasn't planning to yet, but light had arrived, out of cycle. At school that day, things blurred, words misplaced themselves, voices sounded 2 steps behind their mouths. No one else noticed. That's often how these rifts begin, between what's seen and what waits behind dream-thinned pages. By the time she walked home, the page buzzed in her bag, so she placed it back in the sketchbook, smoothed it down, closed the cover, and whispered, as if speaking to something living inside it, "I'm sorry I forgot you." The air folded itself around her shoulders like a tired answer to a question not fully asked, and from nowhere, again, 3 bells sounded, muffled, wet, like they were calling from inside the lake, inside the dream, inside what she can no longer keep out. It didn't exist yesterday. The house across the street, number 211, was always just that, a faded blue house, drawn curtains, no one home. Sarah knew it well. She sketched part of its stair railing once with the curl that reminded her of a violin scroll. Unremarkable, quiet, but now it had a second floor that she had never seen before. At first, she thought she was dreaming. She stepped back from her nightstand at midnight, glass of water in hand, and paused, lifted the curtain, and there it was, a door window. 2nd story, directly across, facing hers, a dim light behind it, and the faintest flicker of movement. But what shook her most wasn't the motion, it was that the light inside had the same color as the lamps in her dream visits, golden gray, lantern-colored. She stared hard. The window didn't blink, but something behind it shifted, slow, like the page of a large book being turned by someone who knew exactly what you'd feel when you realized they were already on your chapter. Sarah set the glass down without sipping. Her hand shook slightly. She leaned forward, face just an inch from the chill of her window pane, and whispered as if to herself, "You weren't here yesterday." A shape moved inside the room, paused behind the curtain across the way, and held a sketchbook. Open, turned as if they had just shown her something she hadn't seen yet. She blinked just once, and when she opened her eyes, the shape was gone. The window still glowing, but empty, the kind of empty that carries watching inside it. She pulled the curtain closed, quickly, but not slammed, then sat on the floor beneath the window, back against the wall, tried to breathe steadily. Her own sketchbook whispered in her bag, the page from the shop and the one from the dream beneath the lake shimmering softly like they'd just been looked at. She opened the book, pulled out the door sketch. Now something new had appeared in it, tiny, barely there in the upper corner, a small square, a window drawn with smudgy golden light and reflected in it, a girl looking at herself from someone else's side. She scribbled a question beneath it, not even forming the words, just jagged lines and curves, emotion shaped like inquiry, and then a full sentence wrote itself underneath, neat, slanted, not her handwriting. "I was here before you were home." Her throat tightened, not in fear, but in the kind of awe reserved for cathedrals or fortunate timing. She spoke to the page again. "Who are you?" No answer came, but the page warmed and glowed, and then a date appeared in the margin, tonight's date, and one word beneath it, midnight. Below that, lake. Sarah swallowed hard, stood up, opened the curtain just an inch. The window across the street now shimmered like a pond right before something surfaces. A faint outline, feminine, maybe, was sitting in the window frame, resting a chin in open hands. No movement, but still watching. Sarah looked down at her hands. They were scribbled in graphite smears, one under her nail, two on her wrist from leaning too long. The door beneath the lake, the tower, the shop with her lost things, and now someone is watching her watch back. She didn't close the curtain this time. She folded the page, tucked it inside the pillowcase, and leaned into the blanket, knowing that if she slept, she wouldn't be alone in the dream tonight. And just before she closed her eyes, the light in the window across the street blinked like a page turned with intent. In the dream, Sarah stood near the lake, but not on the same old path. This version of the lake had no signs, no benches, no moon overhead, just a long stretch of still water and tall grass that whispered when she wasn't listening. And there, on the opposite side, half veiled by reeds and fog, sat a girl, knees pulled up, sketchbook resting against one thigh, pencil moving, not hurried, not hesitant. Every line had already been remembered before it was drawn. Sarah felt it before she saw it. Recognition. Not like a mirror, but a story told in the same voice. The girl looked like her, only not exactly, a little older, eyes darker, hair longer, with half a braid coming undone. But the shape, the stillness, it was her. As she stepped forward, she half expected the dream to shift, like most dreams do, warping at the moment you realize too much. But it didn't. The girl didn't vanish. She looked up, made eye contact, smiled, soft, tired, like someone who'd known her forever but chose not to say it. And when Sarah reached the edge of the water, the girl waved her over. There was no boat, no ripple, but she blinked and found herself on the same side, her shoes dry, pencil warm in her jacket pocket. The girl patted the ground beside her. Sarah sat without speaking. The night held enough silence for both of them for a while. Then the girl handed her the sketchbook. Its leather cover shimmered like quiet metal, not new but remembered by 100 hands. Sarah opened it. Every page held scenes she knew, only slightly changed, details she had meant to include in her own drawings, but forgot or doubted or erased too soon. The missing stair on the dream tower, the hollow window behind the door under the lake, the mailbox that never opened until someone whispered the right sentence. At the bottom of one page was a drawing of her. Sarah, sleeping in her own bed, last week's pajamas, right hand curled beneath her cheek, the curtains drawn back, and in the window, the same glow from the stranger's sketchbook. The girl spoke for the first time. "I've been drawing you back, soft, certain." "Why?" Sarah asked. "Because you forgot you came here first." A pause. "I don't understand." The girl pointed at the lake. Its surface began shifting, page by page, scenes folding upward in liquid bloom, not reflections, moments. Her first dream of the tower, The now missing streetlight outside her childhood home, the day she fell asleep on the train and almost missed the realtor stop, but didn't because she felt something wrong on that road up ahead. You didn't find these places, the girl said. They found you again. Sarah's hand shook as she turned another page. At the center, a symbol drawn in bold graphite, a circle, an open keyhole. Inside it, a name, her name. Then, underneath, a signature written in the same hand that had appeared in every page. She couldn't explain. Sarah, only signed backward. I don't remember drawing that, she whispered. The girl gently closed the book in her lap and said, Some things you draw inside someone else's dream. The wind shifted, the lake sank into silence again. The world didn't end. The girl faded, not into nothing, but back into the page. Her eyes the last to disappear, not afraid, just patient. Sarah lowered her head, felt the pencil-inch weight of her name beneath her ribs, and heard 4 words echo beneath the water. You came back right. She woke with a start, tears on her cheeks she didn't remember making, curtains still drawn, pillow perfectly crumpled, sketchbook open on her chest, pencil rolling onto her lap, and drawn on the inside cover, fresh and warm, with her own hand, but unknown until now, greater than asterisk, to the version of me who never gave up remembering asterisk. She woke an instant before it rang, lay there, flat, eyes wide open, breath held like the world had paused, and then it happened. Not a sound, but a vibration. Something struck deep beneath her ribs, faint but full. A bell tone she didn't hear. She remembered it, as if someone had wrapped the universe around her chest and whispered, It's time. The clock read 2 a.m., too early to be sunrise, too late to call it night. Sarah sat up slowly. The sketchbook pulsed on the side table. She reached for it, but didn't open it yet. First, she looked out to where the dream tower had begun appearing again, in shadows, in skyline, in street puddles that shouldn't reflect buildings so tall. And now, its image was burned into the clouds, not visibly, but she felt its shape above the rooftops, the way you'd know where a mountain was even in absolute dark. She whispered. You rang. Some air in the room moved, glass on her water tilted, the curtains parted half an inch. Even in the silence, she sensed the tone again, echo rising, bending time inward. 3 quiet pulses. Now, return. Listen. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Bare feet padded softly toward the center of the room. Stop. Turn. Desk. The green drawing again. The tower. The door. The stairway she hadn't drawn, yet was always there. Now something new had scorched itself into the base of the page. A symbol. 3 rings, interlocked, drawn as if they trembled, and beneath them just 4 words. It knows you're awake. She should have been afraid, but she wasn't. Some part of her, the part that had lived in that tower more times than she could count in ink, was ready. She opened the window. Air rushed in, cool, not like night air, like something coming down from altitude. The fog on the hilltops curled low, almost beckoning, and there, far off, a flicker atop the impossible place. The tower, half light, visible only when your eyes stopped trying to prove it. She took 2 steps back, picked up her coat. The air in the house calmed, but the hum in the sketchbook page didn't. Ink shimmered again. This time it bled slightly outward, letters forming. Door will appear. Walk when the tone rings again. She waited 1 minute, 2, then only once. Inside her, like an echo in her childhood pillow, she walked. Out the front door, down the street bathed in damp silver, past the stop sign that sighed in windless air, and there, exactly where her sketch on page 12 had not meant to lead, a path carved out of fog, not sidewalk, not grass trail, a gun-grey corridor in vapor, with prints only half melted beneath her, as if she was following someone who had arrived just seconds sooner. No buildings, no lights, just her and the key. Tower in the distance, growing every time she blinked. The dream hadn't ended, it had simply chosen to come collect her. She walked until the air felt thick, not heavy like storm, but compressed, like breathing inside an unspoken page, and finally a shift. The base of the tower, stone, impossible geometry, stairs, no, just a voice. You remember enough now, the rest lives up there. A platform lowered, mist held it still, and Sarah stepped on without questions, because questions didn't serve you well once the bells had begun to ring. The platform rose without sound, no cables, no wheels, just air that lifted deliberately, like it knew the shape of weight better than gravity ever could. Sarah stood still. The tower wasn't dark. It glowed from within like a lantern with walls. Stone became story, and the higher she rose, the warmer it got. Not heat, but familiarity. Like being wrapped in someone else's coat and realizing they've missed you. The walls around her pulsed gently, etched with lines that shimmered faintly. She reached out, ran her fingertips along one, and the wall whispered, not in sound, but sensation. Just 5 words, greater than asterisk. You've been here before, Sarah. Asterisk. She pulled her hand back sharply, but the line stayed glowing where she'd touched it. Her name, written in light, as if the stone itself had spoken it back. You know me, she murmured. The wall pulsed again. This time a glyph beneath the surface illuminated 3 interlocking circles, the same as in her sketchbook. Below it another word appeared, not in English, but somehow understandable. Archivum, she whispered it aloud. The air responded by opening a doorway. In the wall to her left, not a door, just a passage that hadn't been open a moment before. The platform stilled. She stepped into the space. It was small, rounded like a throat. The floor swirled into spiral stone, but again, no stairs, just a gentle slope. Rising, she began to walk. The further she climbed, the more the marks on the walls revealed sequences, drawn like constellations, but moving slightly, like someone was rewriting them slowly as she passed. Some turned as she neared. One bloomed like ink dropped in water. It formed a phrase, greater than asterisk. Not your first face, but a faithful one. Asterisk. Her hand trembled, but not from fear. She followed the slope. Up ahead, an opening, a hollowed landing where light blinked drowsily through slits in the wall. She neared and saw a pedestal in the center, nothing on it but words etched around the edge. Place what was taken. She reached into her coat pocket, not sure why, and her fingers grazed the edge of the missing page from weeks earlier. It fluttered in her hand like it remembered falling from a timeline that never fully closed. She She laid it gently on the pedestal, and with a soft exhale, the tower sighed as if it had been holding its lungs in anticipation. The page melted into the stone. In its place, a symbol glowed. A door appeared up ahead, no handle, just her name, written backward at first, then clearer, then breathing. Door cracked itself open just an inch. Fog swirled inside, thick and full of the feeling that something deeply old resided just beyond. She stepped in. The room inside the chamber was impossibly quiet, but not silent. It held the hum of something so deeply known that speaking would be disrespectful. Stars clothed the ceiling, but not outside stars. Inner sky. Lines of motion mapped across the walls like veins in marble lined with thought. Each step she took left a momentary echo in the floor behind her, and words formed at her heels, greater than "there you are," no punctuation, no shock, just recognition. At the center of this final room stood a tall mirror, but it was covered, wrapped in cloth that flowed without moving. She stood before it, waited. The cloth unraveled slowly, not pulled, unfolded, and beneath it, her reflection, but not now. A mosaic of moments, her first smile in 3 years. That time she drew a door in class and couldn't stop shaking. The look she gave the stranger at the lake, her entire story silent and lit from within, not explained, just displayed, accepted. And then, across the glass, a final string of light appeared. You never forgot the places, only that they belonged to you. She stepped back, and the tower sealed the memory in light, not locking it, preserving it, so she could return whenever she was ready to carry it again. The shoreline looked the same, but it wasn't. Not now, not after the tower, not after the room of mirrors and the soundless bell that still seemed to chime in her spine. Lake Una was quiet, but not serene. Today, it felt more like a book just left open. A few pages turned by breeze, not forgotten, just paused. Sarah walked the same path she always had, down the gravel curve near the hollowed tree trunk, across the bend where her dreams had once mistaken benches for doorways, but now there was a difference. Each step landed as if the ground recognized her, not letting her sink, not rushing to hold her, just existing for her returning. The water wasn't still. Tiny ripples pulsed outward from a spot near the center, but no bird flew down, no fish broke the surface, no wind touched her hair. The ripples were self-made, persistent, predictable, calling. She sat at the edge, shoes sinking a little into the soft soil, opened her sketchbook. The pages flipped on their own and landed on one she hadn't seen in weeks. It was a sketch she didn't remember finishing of the lake from above, except there were lines beneath the surface, tunnels, rings, no paths, curved like questions, lined with shapes that looked like sleeping doors. A drop from the sky, or maybe not the sky, splashed into the lake at that exact moment. Her drawing glowed faintly, and the shoreline fog curled in. One more time, the lake was inviting her. She closed the book, stood, listened, and heard it again. Not the bell, but that feeling, like standing in the presence of a name that belonged to you, but hadn't been used aloud in a while. She stepped into the water, shoes and all, just ankle deep, but the lake didn't chill her. Instead, it warmed like old bath water once shared with someone kind, step by step, now to her knees, and the sound began, a slow hum, not audible, not from outside, but beneath, like something inside the lake was thrumming in key with her breath. Then a shape, rising, flat, firm, drifting toward her, not from the center, from beneath her reflection. She looked down, and her reflection smiled, only she hadn't, not with her real face, but the one in the lake had. The board reached her toes. A platform? No. A page, not paper, stone, maybe, etched on top, greater than asterisk, to remember fully, place what was lost where it first belonged. She reached into her jacket, pulled the old marble, the one from the shop between aisles, smooth, clouded, lakeside colored. She knelt and placed it in the center of the floating page. It vanished, gently, sinking into the surface like a thought well spoken. The ripples stopped, the water stilled. Then, without warning, the center of the lake sank 5 inches, not collapsing but exhaling. Steam curled outward like sighs between forgotten paragraphs, and at the heart of the lake a circle blinked open, soft golden light beneath water, a tunnel hidden, waiting, lit as if from within, not for swimming, for returning. Sarah stood still, shoes soaked, hands trembling, and just before she stepped in, a voice from inside her own mind said, "This is not where you end, it's just where you'll finally begin from again." And with that, Sarah stepped into the lake, into the hole the world had hidden only until she remembered what she gave it. She did not sink. When Sarah stepped into the lake's open center, gravity forgot its rules. The world didn't rush upward, and she didn't fall. She was simply carried, suspended in light, the color of used paper and warm breath. The opening above her rippled shut, not sealing her in, but tucking her away like a letter in an old drawer. It was quiet here, not silent. She could still hear her heartbeat, but not in her ears. In the walls, because yes, there were walls. Moss-wrapped stone curved around her like the inside of a seashell, pulsing gently with gold script that lit one word at a time. Greater than asterisk, welcome, Sarah, asterisk, greater than asterisk, you built these rooms, asterisk. The first hallway glowed dim and soft. She moved without walking, a breath drawn forward. Doorways passed on either side. Some flickered open, some turned away. Each held familiar weight. Behind one, her old classroom, filled entirely with salt water, floating desks, no teacher, only mirrors where chalkboards once were. Behind another, a room made of mitten fabric, playing the echo of a lullaby she couldn't fully remember, but began humming anyway. She wandered until she stopped in front of a locked door. Moss shaped like a keyhole pulsed at chest height. She reached toward it instinctively, felt something press through her, a memory not hers and hers completely. A white hallway, the sound of her name said too kindly, the sharp cold of saying, "I'm fine," when she was not. The moss opened, the door faded inward, and the world inside was grey, except one glow, a sketch of herself, but younger, in a room that had never existed until now. She touched the drawing, and the voice returned, the same one from the tower, maybe from herself, maybe from everywhere these dreams existed. These were echoes. You dropped them as you grew, thinking they were noise. They were instruction. In the center of that room stood a pedestal, empty, until her sketchbook floated from her side and landed on it, opened by an unseen hand. Pages flipped inward, midway, stopped, one blank. One illustration peeled upward from beneath ink, a staircase leading downward through the page. Door after door opened with each new line in her notebook. She was no longer remembering these dreams. They were remembering her. In the final chamber, the walls showed scenes drawn sideways, the hallway she always found in her nightmares but never dared to cross, the field with too many moons, the table with one chair missing, and a teacup stained with a poem she never shared until now. She stood in the middle of all she'd forgotten, and the voice said, "It's time now for one of these rooms to come back with you." Sarah looked around. All felt impossible, too large, too ancient, but one shimmered, a room made only of sunlight and stairs down to somewhere older still. She blinked and whispered, "That one." The room folded inward, shrank into a spiral, then into a page in her sketchbook, and just as she touched it, the water whispered through her spine, "You are the cartographer of places that should not exist until someone dreams them urgently enough." And then Sarah rose, upward through liquid and light. The surface opened gently above her. She came up for air, but didn't gasp. She exhaled slowly, fully, like someone surfacing from not fear, but depth. And on the shoreline, dry feet, a girl's voice, hers, saying aloud, greater than, "I know where we go next." Sarah woke early, before the dream could close its door, before light decided how to filter into her room. She sat up, breath slow. The notebook was on her chest, open, pages not fluttering, just still, resting, but heavy with something they didn't hold yesterday. She didn't speak. Her feet found the floor before her thoughts did. Then a breeze through the crack in her window, carrying with it a scent she didn't recognize at first. Not quite pine, not quite earth. It smelled like shade, shade from trees that shouldn't exist. She stepped outside, didn't even glance at the road. The world was silent in that way it gets when you're the only one awake who remembers differently. She walked toward the lake out of instinct. Everything looked the same until it didn't. Just beyond the reeds, past the sand curved like a smile, there it was, a tree line, dense, shifting slightly in the breeze, rising in a place she knew had held only flat ground yesterday, where pastures rolled lazily toward nowhere in particular. Now stood a wall of green and grey, impossibly wide. It wasn't eerie, it was expectant. She stopped at the edge. The trees weren't ordinary, their bark twisted in soft spirals. Leaves moved as if breathing through several seasons at once. Some branches curled around invisible things, waiting, watching. Sarah didn't ask herself how it got here. Some part of her had always expected it. Since the first dream, the wandering hallway, the tideless beach, the classroom with no calendars, they were all pieces of where the forest begins. This was just the first time it had dared to show itself clearly. She opened her sketchbook on the hilltop, a new page, blank but already warm. Things like paper didn't pulse, not unless something on the other side was holding it too. She watched the trees for a moment longer, then began to draw, line after line, roots, a bridge, a staircase made of books, a light in the canopy where lamps don't belong. With every mark her pencil made, the tree line changed, responded, opened just slightly wider. By the third sketch, a path revealed itself, not by clearing but by bending. Branches leaned out of the way, leaves shifted, left in quiet approval. The morning fog pooled low, framing her next footfall, a corridor waiting, written just for her, lit by breaths and memory. She stood, pages open, spine warm, and looked over her shoulder, not for watchers, but for fear she once would have carried. It wasn't there anymore. All that remained was returning, even if she had never stood in this forest before. She belonged to it, because not every traveler steps somewhere new. Sometimes the world builds the road when your breath finally slows enough to deserve it. The sketchbook closed itself. A light flickered in the trees, and Sarah stepped forward into the place that wasn't there yesterday, but had waited hundreds of midnights for her first footstep, to remember what it felt like to finally come home. The path bent, not in a straight line, but like a ribbon curling behind thought. The trees grew thicker, yet taller. They didn't crowd her. They made space, just enough for one dreamer to pass through at their own pace, which is to say, her pace. Sarah walked softly. All the sounds of nature were absent. No birds, no insects, only the hush of things, not lost, but waiting. And then she saw it at the center of a cleared hollow, resting atop a stump carved with curved, deliberate grooves. A book. Not large, not small. Its cover shimmered like bark polished with dusk. There was no title, just a pressed moon shape in the center, its crescent carved perfectly outward, facing her, like a smile that had waited far too long to stretch again. She approached. No footsteps stirred behind, no canopy shifted above. The clearing seemed to breathe inward with each beat of her heart. She knelt beside the stump, stared at the book, said nothing, and still it opened, a single page, blank, until the wind rose slightly and dusk deepened. As soon as the sky turned a shade darker, an ash-blush grey, a word appeared, glowing faintly at the page's center. Just one, greater than remember. Sarah blinked, tried to speak, but something in her bones told her, don't answer, just let it happen. She waited, the light faded, the page turned itself, another blank page. She glanced upward, the sky faded slightly again. New word, greater than before. Her arms grew cold, not with fear, with recognition. A third word, beneath. She realized then the book was telling a story. Slowly, one dusk-fueled word at a time, requiring presence, requiring patience, no skipping ahead, no plot, just trust. What came next? She had to wait, and as the sun dipped further into the promise of night, the fourth page turned, a phrase this time, full line. We brought you here to find what you left when you tried to become smaller. Sarah felt seen. Pages continued, only at twilight thresholds. She stayed with the book until full dark, watching letters emerge like stars, blinking open in a sky no longer afraid to be big again. By night's end, the full sentence spanned 6 pages. What you don't remember yet is what allowed the forest to wake. You're not just the dreamer, you're what made it possible to walk back into it. She closed the book gently, leaned forward, pressed her forehead to its cover, and whispered, I'll keep remembering. The wind curled around her spine in reply, and the moonlight above shimmered just enough to show her the path was still unfolding. It began like memory. The clouds rolled over the forest, not with thunder, but weight, warm, wait. Sarah stood at the edge of a clearing she didn't remember entering, watching the sky shift gently between shades. And then rain, but no sound, no tapping of leaves, no percussion on the canopy, just drops falling like thoughts she forgot she meant to think. Each drop hovered half a second just before touching anything, as if asking, "Are you ready for this?" She tilted her face upward. The rain kissed her cheeks and sat in her palm. Not cold, not warm, just right, like the kind of stillness that lives between forgiveness and becoming. The forest bowed, branches dipped, not from the water, but in reverence. This rain wasn't for the ground, it was for the dreamers, the ones who left places behind and then dared return. Sarah walked forward, each step blooming softly, not puddles, pages. Her feet pressed poems into the moss, words neither she nor the forest remembered writing, but accepted anyway. The notebook in her coat was warm, a light pulsed from within it, gently with each breath she took, as though it was asleep, fully trusting her to carry it wherever came next. At the center of the clearing stood a chair, old, wood-stained, soft around the edges. She sat, not to rest, to mark something, that she had returned, that remembering doesn't hurt anymore, that even now this story hadn't ended, but offered its silence like a letter that doesn't need to be opened to be understood. As the rain fell, one final drop landed on the cover of her sketchbook. The ink shimmered, and a sentence formed slowly across the line where all her dreams had been balanced. Just one. You made space for a world that didn't want to be forgotten. She smiled, closed the book, pressed it to her chest, and let the rain fall quietly around her, blessing not her body, but the path she had finally remembered how to walk.